So we are essentially done with our conversation regarding the Constitution of the United States, the supreme law of our land. We know that the Constitution is divided into the preamble, the articles, and the amendments. And that each of the articles outlines the structure of our government. So this quarter is going to be studying the structure of how our government is put together and how our government works. And so the first article of the Constitution is the legislative branch, Article 1. And so we're going to start off with our study of how does the legislative branch works. So exactly what is the legislative branch? Well, the legislative branch is the House of Representatives plus the Senate. And you put them together and you get the word Congress. Now we call a member of the Senate a senator, but ironically we call a member of the House of Representatives a congressman. Regardless, when you hear the word Congress, you're talking about both arms of Congress, the House and the Senate. We are presently in the 115th Congress term. That tells me that because a term of Congress is 2 years, that means that our Congress is met for 230 times. And that is because you take 115 and multiply it by 2. We are in session 1, sometimes called session A, because that we begin on an odd numbered year. It's 2017. Our elections occur in an even numbered year, which was November of 2016. So since the election is at the end of an even numbered year, a Congress starts on an odd numbered year, and they have to begin on January 3rd. That is a requirement by the Constitution. So let's take a look at the membership that we find in Congress. What are their age requirements? Who are they? So firstly, we're going to look at the number of members that are, there are 435 members and 100 in the Senate. So what we want to do is we want to take a look at how many are female and how many are male. So we're back. Here is a website that kind of gives us the demographics of our Congress. So if you look at the map of the United States, the red, of course, represents Republican, and 241 of our congressmen of the 435 are Republican, and 194 are Democrat. So in the House of Representatives, the Republican Party has is quite in control. In the Senate, it's not so specific. There are 52 Republicans and 48 senators. If we look at the demographics of the male to female, we notice that there are 21 women, okay, out of 535. So of course, there's only 16. There are there are 21 out of 435. I'm sorry. There are only 7 that are considered new members. 36 of them have been there fewer than 6 years. Okay. Only 1 that is openly LGBTQ. Okay. In terms of people of color, if you look Black, Hispanic, Asian, or racial minorities, we have a 19. And so that kind of tells us that the demographics of our Congress is definitely, white males. Okay. The Republicans control the majority of everything. I should have this changed to 2016, 2017. I just noticed that. And we just talked about those numbers there. Okay. And qualifications. So what if you want to be a House member? There is age, citizenship, and residency. This is what we look at. In the House, you have to be 25 years old, and you have to be a U.S. citizen for the last 7 years. And you have to be a citizen of the state that you represent. In the House of Representatives, it also is an informal amendment that says that you have to live and be a citizen of the district you represent. In the Senate, you just have to be a citizen of the state because there are no districts when you're talking about the Senate. They are voted at large. Okay? What are their terms of office? In the case of the House of Representatives, all 435 members are up for re-election every 2 years. Whereas in the Senate, they are up for re-election, a third of them. So the Senate is called a continuous body. It is called a continuous body because you can never have an all-new Senate. Where it is conceivable, you could have an all-new House of Representatives, meaning that every member of the 435 get voted out of office. And we talked about a little bit about that during the election, but that doesn't happen very often. Their salaries are base of $174,000. And in Iowa, in Northwest Iowa, that sounds like a tremendous amount of money. But we do need to put it into perspective. These members have to maintain 2 homes, one in the state that they represent and one in Washington, D.C. Oftentimes that means 2 sets of vehicles and other kinds of difficult things of running 2 households. The most common reason that senators and congressmen stop being servants of their state is that they simply can't afford to do that. Okay, they have lots and lots of pension benefits, which we will talk about a little bit later. The presiding officer, the officer in charge of the House of Representatives, is the Speaker of the House, and remember that that is Paul Ryan. And in the Senate, that is the Vice President of the United States, so that's Mike Pence's job. So he went from governor to being Vice President and also President of the Senate. Okay? There are other leaders that you will find in the House and the Senate. They're called majority floor leaders, minority floor leaders, and what are called whips. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about them, but for right now, we're just going to have you jot down those terms. Okay? So we're going to move on here and talk about how do you figure out how many representatives every state has. Originally in the Constitution, it said that for every 30,000 citizens, there should be 1 representative. And in 1929, that would have been 10,200. If that would be held true today, there would be 10,233 congressmen. Obviously, if we don't think they get done with anything in 435, there's no way with over 10,000 anything would get done. So in 1929, our Congress simply started to identify the problem is that the numbers were getting too big. There simply weren't enough chairs. So they decided to set the number at 435. That law is called the Reapportionment Act of 1929, and it's a great example of informal amendment to the Constitution. So they said that the Congress will never, the House of Representatives, will never exceed 435. Now, this is not talking about the Senate. The Senate has 100 members. If we ever add a state, let's say Puerto Rico decides to join the Union, they will get their 2 senators and we would go to 102 senators. But the number of 435 would not change. So in every 10 years, we do what is called a reapportionment or a realignment in Congress. We take those 435 members and we shuffle them. Those that gain population will gain of that 435, and those that lose population will it will be taken away from them. So let's take a look. The House of Representatives is the chamber that has districts. The Senate does not. So when we're talking about congressional reapportionment, we're talking about the numbers of representatives each district has in the House of Representatives, okay? And so this is called federalism at its heart. So it starts at the number, the national government decides how many representatives each state has. And then each state gets to decide what their districts are going to look like. So basically think about it as Washington, D.C. says, hey, Iowa, you get 5. And then the governor and the General Assembly in Des Moines get to say, okay, what's those 5 districts going to look like? And in 2010, our federal government said, hey, Iowa, you get 4. And then the Des Moines General Assembly and our governor at that time had to decide what the 4 districts look like. So this is federalism at its heart. So step 1 is you have to take the census. You got to know what the population of the United States is. And we are gearing up for that census in 2020. Right now, the Census Bureau is doing its hiring, and because it takes a long time to gather all of that information. They take the population of the United States and they divide it by 435 members. Remember, that's because of the Appropriation Act. That's going to give you a number of citizens per district. You take that number and you divide it by the state's population, and that's going to tell you how many um, how many districts a state has. So let's look at it in a formula way. So you might want to jot these down. Population of the United States divided by 435. That number in 2010 was roughly 700,000 people. You take that 700,000 people and you divide it by the population of the state. In the case of Iowa, our population was roughly 3,557,995. If you divide that by 709,760, we get 4.3 districts. So we have 4 districts. Okay? What that means is that one man, one vote. It means every representative in the House of Representatives, whether they're from the 1st District of California or the 1st District of Iowa or the 1st District of Florida, they all represent the same number of people, approximately 709,000 people. So the 1st District of California cannot say, ha ha, 1st District of Iowa, we're more important than you because we're from California. And the 1st District of Iowa can say, I don't care because you only represent 700,000 people, which is what I do. It is when the representatives of California band together. Then you're talking 54 representatives. If they vote as a block, they of course are going to outvote Iowa with 4. But to be honest, that rarely happens. Because think about California. Some of their representatives represent people and citizens in urban areas, whereas Northern California is fundamentally agricultural. And therefore, it should not surprise us that Northern California representatives oftentimes vote alongside Iowa because we share similar interests: hog industry, dairy farming, and agriculture. So let's take a look at it. If you can kind of see the different colors, they represent the 435 districts of the 2010 census. So if you look at Iowa, we have 4 colors here because we have 4 districts. I know it is difficult to see, but well, not in South Dakota, North Dakota. Everybody gets 1, regardless of whether you have 709,000 people or not. Kansas has 4. Look at that little peach one there. That means that there's 709,000 people there. There's 709,000 people there. There's 709,000 people in Idaho, on the green side of Idaho, in the lighter purple of Washington, in the darker purple of Washington. All of them have 709,000 people. If you look down at Florida, Florida looks like it's got quite a hodgepodge. That's because it's a well-populated state, and therefore each one of those colors represents, yes, you guessed it, 709,000 people. In 1990, Iowa, this is what some of the representatives look like. We had 5, Texas had 30, California 52, 23. So as the elections went along, this is the 2000 and let's see, this is the 1990 to 2000, okay? Notice we still have 5, but Texas jumped up to 32. California jumped up to 51. Florida did 25. Those that are in the light green, they lost population. So because we have to keep the balance of 435, Oklahoma went down 1, so that shifted over to Texas. New York and Pennsylvania lost more than that, and so their population shifted to the states where the population shifted. Okay? If we look at the census of 2010, we really can see the change. In the Midwest there and in the North, look at New York and Ohio keep losing population. People are getting older, and guess what they're doing? They are moving south. They're either moving this way or they're moving this way. In the last 20 years, Texas has gained 6 representatives. That's a tremendous population shift. We're not quite sure what's going on over in Washington State, but their population has steadily grown as well. And this is by studying the way the representatives shift, we can actually study the way our population shifts. Well, not only would we study the way our population shifts in our country, we can study the population shifts in our state. So let's look at Iowa. In 1990, we had 5 districts. and each district was approximately 490,000 people. Understanding that in 2010, that population was 709. So that means there were 490 people here, 490,000 people here, 490,000 people there. You can kind of get my idea. So what happened in 2000? Well, 2000, the number jumped a little bit to about 555. And notice how our congressional districts changed. This took all of the western side of Iowa to make the 550,000 people. The 4th district, which is really kind of hard to see between the blue and the green, but these are all 4th districts, and that is 555,000. 555,000, 555,000, 555,000. So you can tell by looking at the Iowa map that our population is shifting east and south. And guess what? When we went to the 4th district, 4 districts, you can really see it. This is the way our districts look today in 2010. This each represents 709,000 people. Look at how many districts in District 4, how many counties it takes to make 709,000. Whereas in District 3, it takes a lot fewer districts to make 709,000. So we can tell that our population is definitely in the state of Iowa shifting south. Okay? So what we're going to have you do is we're going to have you go to a website called www.redistrictinggame.org. There it's going to require that you follow the directions of how to make a district. Well, how do you do that? Our district is what is called gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is the process that you use as a state legislator to create congressional districts. But at the same time, you want to create one political party over the other. Sometimes it's called packing. We know that Northwest Iowa is predominantly Republican. And so we try to put those counties that are predominantly Republican together. It is legal as long as you follow the court case of Westbury versus Sanders. Westbury versus Sanders has 3 basic ideas. The idea of one man, one vote, that every district has approximately the same size of population. In the case of the 2010 census, that's $709,000. That means that you have to use the smallest number of counties possible. That's what compact means. And they have to be continuous. In other words, you cannot make your districts look oddball, like you can't have them off on an island by themselves. So look at the Iowa districts. All of them are connected. That's called contiguous. Compact means the smallest number of areas possible, and they all represent 709,000 people. So they had to take the smallest number of counties possible that are connected, that's contiguous, and compact. So what you're going to do in your activity here is you are going to try to do that as well. Packing or cracking is the idea of either packing a district so that you have all of the parties together, or cracking is trying to break up a political party. I don't ever find that that's as important as understanding the idea of districting. So after you have these notes, please go to this game and see if you can win. There are actually 3 levels. The first level should be relatively easy, but level 2 and 3, believe me, can be quite difficult. All right, we will talk to you soon. I hope you guys have a great day.